Hey y'all, welcome to Colored Couch Conversations, a podcast where I have intimate conversations with women of color on my couch. Today, we have a very special guest. We will talk about the relationship between the Black and Asian community, which is really important right now, and navigating the workplace during this time. I'm your host, Jazmyn W., and I know my guest very well, love her to death. I was recently a guest on her career-related podcast called Feed Learning People Podcast. She and I worked together at CBS in the HR department, and she left her role in learning and development to found Feed Learning, which is a talent and organizational development consulting practice. She helps companies build sustainable teams through professional development training, one-on-one coaching, and HR process improvement strategies. She has a business management degree from U of H and an MBA business management and entrepreneurship from Seton Hall University. She, like my last guest, is also from Dallas, Texas. Hey, give it up for Jesse Nguyen. Hey, Jesse.
Hey, Jazmyn. It's actually Seton Hall.
Oh, it's Seton Hall, girl.
I don't know if you care.
Listen, Seton Hall. Where is it located?
Orange, New Jersey. Orange.
Okay. Oh, in New Jersey. Okay. Yeah, girl, educate me because I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, so it's Seton Hall University. Oh, pardon me. We must get these collegiate names correct, Jazz. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm excited about this conversation.
Oh, me too. I'm a little nervous because I'm used to being the interviewer, and it's been a long time since I've been on this side of the conversation. So,
well, you'll be on this side a lot more with everything that you have going on with your business, and it's a much needed business right now, actually. So I hope you're excited about how badly companies will need you after everything that's going on. So we always start the podcast with the quote of the day, and you know this quote because you chose it. It's, "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel," by the legendary Maya Angelou. What does this quote mean to you?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is the word impression, like having a lasting impression on someone. Like, even when you asked me to pick a quote, I was like, I remember that quote. And I was looking up online. What was the quote? I was looking up like, I don't remember what you said. I don't remember what you did or feel. So I don't even remember what the quote was about, but I remember how it made me feel. So what the quote means to me is like, it's that impression that you leave on people. Yes, it's important what you say to them, what you do with them, but people won't remember exactly what the conversation was about or what you said that day or what you ate or what you saw, but they'll definitely remember how you made them feel. Did you make them feel angry or happy, or did you want to punch them in the face, or whatever it was? And I think every time I have an interaction with someone, that's what I try to do, is leave some type of positive impression on them.
And I think we learned that, like, working in HR too, because when you talk to people, a lot of times as soon as you make them feel a certain emotion, they actually stop listening to what you're saying anyway.
Yeah.
You know, and you get mad.
You just close off.
Yeah.
And you just think about all the negative things about that person and you don't care what they say.
Exactly. My next question for you about this quote was, when is the last time someone made you feel, period, and how did they make you feel?
I'll give you two examples, one negative and one positive.
Okay.
I would say one negative is, this was like 10 years ago when I was living in New York City and I was playing volleyball, and there was this guy in the volleyball community. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he was like playing favoritism to people a lot, or he was I just remember he was a dick. That's all I remember. I don't remember exactly what, but I just remember every time that I was around him, I would cringe or I would roll my eyes or just want to avoid him just because of whatever he said or did. Again, I don't remember much of it. So that was a negative example. And that was like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And a more recent example that's positive, I would say, I have a couple friends here, Sean and Brian, in San Francisco, and they're probably like the best things ever in San Francisco, these two guys. And for Mother's Day, a few weeks ago, they came over, they drove over, they live about 20, 30 minutes away just to drive by in their mask because we're in quarantine
Mm-hmm.
and yell out, "Hey, happy Mother's Day," like from outside. And I was just staying inside and looking down. And then the following week, they came back for my birthday and the same thing. They brought a cake for me. They just waited outside, just wanted to say happy birthday. So
Yeah.
just that positive experience, someone who's like super considerate and um, nice, and they're just thinking about you. That's a lasting impression, and I think that's going to help me have a lasting friendship with them too.
Yeah. I don't know why. I was on your podcast yesterday and I actually cried, which is not something that I do on podcasts or on camera in general. But even you telling me about your friends driving over, it makes me not want to cry, but it almost gives you that almost emotion because it's just like, that is just so amazing. And I saw that on your Instagram too.
Oh, did you? Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
We're so thoughtful.
And to drive over, and it's not even about like gifts or bringing anything, or it's just to drive over to just be able to wave and see you hold your baby up to the window and just say Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah,
It's so thoughtful.
yeah, thoughtful. So that those type of people, when they're thoughtful, they're very considerate, it makes a lasting impression on me. And I think those impressions, it depends on the person, what type of experience or what characteristics means positive or negative for you. So it depends on each person. And I think anyone who is super thoughtful and considerate and just does small acts of kindness, those type of actions really leaves a positive, lasting impression on me.
Yeah, it does. It does. Okay. Well, we always have a segment that we start off with. It's called Random Questions. And this is just something about me. I don't know. This is how I get to know people. This is how I've always gotten to know people, just asking them random things. So this is an opportunity for us to get to know you a bit. And the first question I have is, one thing about Jessie, she has a young baby and she's married, right? So if you have 2 hours to yourself, what do you do? Like, how do you spend that time?
Okay, I'm gonna give you a lame answer. Sleep. Is that lame?
Yes, that
That's
is
all I
very
can think
lame.
of. Okay, so I'll give you some context. You know that I have a 9-month-old right now. And since we're in quarantine, my husband, he's working like 9 to 5, back-to-back meetings. I'm running my own business, not home. My 9-month-old has a growth spurt right now. So she's eating like a pig and she's waking up more, multiple times in the night, and she's running around and getting into trouble. So have to watch her because daycares are closed, right?
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we're actually going to move back to Brooklyn in a couple of weeks. So I'm packing up the house. So, not much time. So sleep would be nice. But okay. I'll give you a less lame answer.
Yeah, yes, please. Because like if you're wide awake, and you have 2 hours, or if your husband said, you guys are, let's say you're in Brooklyn already and you're settled in and you have an afternoon, like 2 hours on a Sunday to yourself, how would you spend that time?
Binge watch Netflix, or maybe start plucking my eyebrows that I haven't plucked in a while.
Oh my gosh, girl.
Or I'll watch Netflix while plucking my eyebrows because I like to be very efficient and
Right.
get a lot of things done. Is that
Okay.
still lame?
That's lame, but that's fine. Somebody's gonna agree with you on the sleep stuff. Somebody's gonna agree with you on the sleep.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
okay, so your background, Jesse, is Vietnamese. Um, have you ever experienced racism or prejudice as a Vietnamese woman?
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say multiple times, but one, like growing up as a kid, like kids would say like "ching chong wing wong" to me or something like that, right? Say racial slurs. Um, but one that stood out the most was when I think I was about 20 years old or so. I was living in Houston, Texas at the time, and one of my first jobs after graduating college was being part of a, let me say that again. One of my first jobs after graduating college was being part of a management training program with HEB grocery stores. Are you familiar with
Yeah,
HEB?
yeah. In Houston, they're big in Houston.
Yeah. It's like a regional chain of grocery stores in South Texas. And I was part of their management training program. And part of this program, you have to go on different assignments in different stores. So they assigned me to a store in Brenham, Texas. Do you know Brenham?
Girl, no.
Okay.
And it sounds like I'm not about to want to know Brenham either, but keep going.
Brenham, Texas is like maybe an hour and a half west of Houston, Texas. And it's like kind of out in the boonies, and it's like a very white town, maybe population 1,000. And like the store manager at HEB, I think he was going to run for mayor of the town and stuff. It's
Oh,
like a
Lord.
small town, right? So I'm like the only Asian person there at the store. So kind of feeling uncomfortable already.
Mm-hmm.
But so one of my assignments there was to be a front end manager. And a front end manager is someone who oversees like the cashiers, the baggers, the parking lot attendants. And there was one day when a cashier called me because he was having issues with his register and the receipt tape was jamming. So as a manager, I had to go up there and like kind of help him out. And the first thing I did was like apologize to the customer. And the customers, there were two. There was an old man and a woman, white, and they were probably in their 60s or so. So I apologized to them, and I was trying to fix the register, and it wasn't working. And like the customer, the guy, he was like really mad and frustrated and very impatient.
Yeah.
And more impatient and frustrated than normal, I would say.
Yeah.
And I kept apologizing to him. And like probably after a minute, he was like, just stop. I just want to go to customer service. So I walked him to customer service, and I told the customer service rep just the situation about the register not working. And then I left the customers there so they can do their thing. And back in my mind, I was like, why the heck is he so angry? It's just, a register issue. And then a week later, I got a call from the corporate office at HEB.
Wow.
And yeah, I was like, what's going on? And apparently the customer had filed a complaint on me, and it escalated all the way to the corporate office.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what the heck is going on? And the leader, she was a VP who talked to me. She was actually an Asian lady. And she told me, you know what, it turns out that this customer, he was a Vietnam vet, a war vet, and he didn't like Asian people. He didn't like Vietnamese people. So that's why he was giving me a hard time. So at that time, like, it didn't really bother me. It didn't faze me, because I was like, okay, that's his problem. Like,
right.
Okay, you're a racist or whatever. So, okay, whatever. I have thick skin. I can not care about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that VP, she also, I remember her saying something like, hey, this happens all the time. So if you need someone to talk to, call me.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I was like, okay, sure, thanks. But it didn't really hit me or faze me until maybe like 10, 20 years later, until like now, when everything is going on in the world right now. And I'm thinking more about racism. And I'm like, wow, I was a part of it. It happened to me. I didn't understand how important it is to speak up until more recently. I'll be honest with that. Because I used to be someone who was very complicit and would not speak up because racism didn't really affect me, or I felt like it had no impact on me. I'm bigger than that. But I realized recently that, hey, it impacts all of us, even if it's indirectly, and we have to help each other out. So
yeah,
that's an example of racism.
I have a question for you about that experience too, because he said, okay, he's a Vietnam War vet.
Yeah.
Do you think that he knew you were Vietnamese?
I don't know. I don't know if he just did it for Asians or Vietnamese, or maybe I said, I don't remember, because on my name tag, it says like Jessica, but it also says I speak Vietnamese, because you usually have name tags that say if you have a second language. So I think this is like Tôi nói tiếng Việt in Vietnamese. So I think that's why he knew.
Do you get upset? Is it offensive when people suggest that you might be Chinese or Japanese?
Heck yeah, definitely. Yeah. Like I get that a lot when I'm, going out in the restaurants, and, they'll go up to me and they say, Ni hao, which is like hello in Chinese. Like, hey, I'm Vietnamese. I don't speak. I know they're trying to be nice and trying to start a conversation with me, but I'm not Chinese. And it's
Yeah.
usually older white men who
Yeah.
come up to me and say that. Yeah.
And I asked you that specifically because, my I feel like when Black people are experience prejudice, we know off bat. But you said that you've also experienced like prejudice, racism a couple of times. But I would argue that every time somebody came up to you and said ni hao, that's prejudice.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't
I
know. It's
agree.
just you learn I guess my generation, our generation, we learn at an early age that it is not, you don't classify Asian people because you may not know if you're not an expert, you know what I mean? And you're not able to tell by looking at someone, then you just say that they're Asian. You don't make assumptions about people's nationality, where they might be from if you don't know. So I would say that every time somebody comes up to you and makes an assumption about you like that is also prejudice. Would you?
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. I would say growing up, I didn't find it as prejudice because I think I didn't know better.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I see how there's a lot of disparity and, there's with what's going on, that I find it very something that's prejudice and stereotypical and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I had another question for you. Have you ever dated somebody or been on a date with somebody and then realized or maybe had a feeling that they were dating you because you were Asian or had like a little fetish or something like that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, I dated a few people who later on, I think they only dated me because I was Asian. And I found out, I think that's a
Oh,
thing. That's a thing, right? An
it's a
Asian woman
thing.
fetish, right?
It's a thing. How did you find this out, Jesse?
It's like Facebook. Like one you ask about like the dating history or their experience and stuff. And,
Yeah.
they tell me, oh, it's Asian person. Or you look at their Facebook and all their friends are Asian. So all the girls that they are in pictures with are Asian. So I didn't know if they liked me for me or because I was Asian. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think people also get upset, like in the Black community, it's a thing. Like when I don't think Black women get upset when Black guys date outside of their race. I think that we call out a problem when that's all that you date. When you say, "Oh, I only date white women. Oh, I only date Asian women." Why would you only date one type of woman?
Yeah.
Like there are good, beautiful, like fun women in every, from everywhere. So when you say, "Oh, I only date Asian girls," it's like, that's weird.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story about.
Unless you're Asian, by the way. If you Asian and you only date Asian girls, that makes sense.
Okay. So that was me growing up. Like growing up, I made a list of the only people I would date. It is sad. I'm embarrassed to share this. But it's like I would only date Vietnamese. I would only date someone who was Catholic. I would only date someone who is smart and all that stuff. But it had to be Vietnamese.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, I'm pretty big for a Vietnamese person, a Vietnamese female. I'm like 5'7", and most Vietnamese girls are probably like 5 feet or
Yeah.
so. And growing up, it was hard for me to find any Vietnamese guy that was tall enough for me as well. So I had a hard time finding anyone who was Vietnamese to date me. So I ended up dating, out my race and stuff.
Yeah.
So, and once I started dating outside my race, I was like, so much better.
You know what?
It's like there's so much more out there than
Yeah.
just a Vietnamese person. So I get it when people say, hey, just date within your race because you want to keep your culture alive and all that stuff. But also at the same time find that it can be very closed-minded. You're not seeing people for who they are and you're missing out on a lot.
Yeah, you're missing out. And, I say the exact same thing. If you are Jewish and you only want to date a Jewish woman, a Jewish guy, or Black, and you only want to date, I totally understand that, respect that, because you do want to I understand how important it is to keep your language alive, to keep your culture alive and all of that. But you are missing out on other people who could love you and care for you just the same as somebody who's from your own race. So
I absolutely agree. And it's my husband. He's white. He's learning Vietnamese.
Is he?
Yeah. He reads to my daughter these Vietnamese books every night.
So do you speak to your daughter in Vietnamese?
Yeah. I try
Okay.
to as much as possible in Vietnamese, and
Okay, good.
so does my husband. It's kind of broken Vietnamese.
That's cool. That's cool. I had a friend growing up who learned she was half white, half Spanish, and her dad only spoke Spanish to her growing up only. And it kind of stayed that way. And her mom only spoke English. And that's how she was able to be so easily bilingual. So that's dope. Okay. So my next question is what's the last thing you cooked? I don't even know if you cook. That's why I thought this would be a great question. What is the last thing you cooked?
Okay, I'm going to preface my answer by saying I think I'm a pretty decent cook. I cook a lot, both American, Vietnamese, or different cuisines. But the last thing I cooked was actually last night. Because we are moving soon, so I'm trying to get rid of all the foods that we have, and we have a lot of angel hair pasta.
Yeah.
So I was just gonna cook pasta. I kind of put too much pasta and too little water. Like I put 2 boxes of pasta in water.
Yeah.
I basically have a clump of pasta right now in my fridge.
You didn't stir it? Or
I, I did stir it, and I tried to add oil and butter to make it like not stick as much, but because it's
yeah.
so much pasta and not enough water, it gets very starchy.
Yeah.
And plus the baby was crying, so I had to go get her, so I wasn't able to finish it, and it's a clump.
Nobody's eating that, Jesse. Throw that out. Um
I told myself I'm going to eat it, but I probably end up won't.
Yeah, you're not gonna eat that, girl. Throw that out. It's done. All right, y'all. Well, we're going to take a little break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some trending topics. That's going to include, the relationship between Asian and Black community. We're going to talk about everything that's happening with the riots, or not the riots. Let me say everything that's happening in regards to the protests after the death of George Floyd. And we're going to talk about some work stuff, some hostility in the workplace. So this is going to be good. Let's take a break and we'll come right back. Hey y'all, welcome back to Colored Couch Conversations. I'm your host, Jazmyn W., and my guest is Jesse Nguyen. She is the founder of Feed Learning, which is a talent and organizational development consulting practice. If you think you need her, or if your company needs her, there'll be more information under the description in this podcast on how to reach her and all of that. But now we're going to talk about some trending topics. The first one is everyone seems to be making an effort towards inclusivity, and the Black Lives Movement is just, all these brands are coming out and talking about what they're going to do and their goals after the recent global protests. How are your group of friends reacting to this, or even your family members reacting to this? Because I feel like there's so many people from different backgrounds, white people, brown people, on my timeline speaking out for the first time, and, willing to step up and back Black, which I've never seen this in this capacity before. So how are your group of friends and your family reacting?
Yeah, it's something that I am actually proud to talk about now, that they're reacting in a very positive way. So a little bit of context, most of my friends are Vietnamese, or either Chinese, Vietnamese, or the Asian community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And growing up, we would be very silent. Like if something was wrong, something was not right, you just stay silent and you just do your own thing. You work hard so that you can get where you need to be, kind of like the whole American dream thing.
Mm-hmm.
But lately, what I'm seeing on my social media and all of my friends and family I'm following, people are speaking up. And I read somewhere online how like everyone has their own lane on how they support Black Lives Matter. Like if you're educating yourself or you're donating. And I'm seeing that within my family and friends, where some people are like donating to the NAACP Defense Fund or ACLU and stuff. So they're donating. Or I have a cousin who started buying books on like white privilege or like, anti-blackness and all that stuff about the system of oppression. So she's educating herself, and other people are just sharing and posting articles, and others are protesting. So like everyone has their own lane.
Yeah.
And it makes me happy to see that, because these are people who typically don't voice their opinion at all, and they are voicing their opinion. And furthermore, with myself, I recently started to create this training called Mitigating Unconscious Bias for a client a couple of months ago. And this was very timely too. And while doing my research, I was like, why am I just keeping all this information to myself and for the client? So I decided to start posting what I was learning on my Instagram stories.
Yeah, I've been reading those.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping people are, learning more about like microaggressions and privileges and stereotypes and the system of oppression and stuff. So yeah, that's how we're responding. And I'm really happy to see people speaking up and voicing their opinion and not staying silent.
Yeah. And I talked about this on your podcast too. Like, I think a lot of times people feel overwhelmed or like they might not be doing enough, but posting to your community, talking to your people first about these issues and, just having that open dialogue is, to me, the very first step to actually taking action, And people might say, oh, that ain't enough, or that's too small, or whatever. But, it starts at home, and we say that with everything else. And we need to say that with, like systematic racism and the way that we think about other people too. So it's one of the reasons I started this podcast. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And I agree with what you said about it starts at home. I even talked to my brother about it. And my brother, he also was the type that just sticks to himself. He's like, it's not my problem. I don't need to deal with it. But when I started sharing with him like the research and what I'm learning, he actually called me the other day and he's like, hey, I'm feeling a little like frustrated and confused. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said that he feels like he's playing a part of this whole systemic racism by not speaking up, by not doing, anything about it. And it was based off of the article that I shared on my social media, and he read it.
Yeah.
But he felt frustrated and confused because he's not doing what he should be doing. And he even asked me, hey, what are some things, or what are some books you think I should check out? Or what are some things that I can do to just get the conversation started? Because I want to figure out what I can do and what role I play in this.
Yeah.
So I kind of gave him some things that he should check out, like reading on the system of oppression and all that stuff. So
that's dope. I love that. This question is very interesting because, to be completely honest, before we had this conversation, I knew that you're Vietnamese, but I didn't think about the Vietnamese War before this conversation, right? And the trending topic that I want to talk about is many Black people feel like they haven't been treated the greatest, by the elder Asian community. When I think the initial thing when Black people, well, first of all, Black people don't feel like Asian people speak out enough. They say, we're people of color when we're talking about inclusivity, but it's separate whenever we're talking about racial issues, when we should stick together. And the reason I brought up the Vietnam War is because, to me, if there was a war against my people, there would be some animosity there between me and American people. It's like the Vietnam War, look what we did to Vietnam. You know what I mean? So when you come here and you're when you come here and you're Vietnamese, that relationship between American people might be a little bit awkward to me if it was my experience. I don't know if that's your experience. I'm just trying to guess, but that also, all of this affects our relationship, the relationship between Americans and Vietnamese people who are from Vietnam, which might be your grandparents, could be your parents, and then that relationship with the Black community. So what has your experience been between like the elders in your family and the relationship with American people first and Black people here in America? Do they have animosity towards American people in general or Black people? Do you have older people in your family who are racist?
Yeah. Where do I
I
start?
know that's a lot.
So I think when it comes to like the Vietnam War, that's something that I need to educate myself more to. Me being
Same.
Vietnamese, like I need
Yeah.
to know more about it. But I know everyone's experience is different from the Vietnam War. So some people don't. Some Vietnamese people have some animosity towards the Americans, but
Mm-hmm.
other people, like I know, like my dad, he is kind of thankful for the American experience that he's having right now. So there's not
Mm.
that much animosity there. So from my understanding, it's a lot of immigrant families from Vietnam who came over to the States. We are thankful for the privileges that we have. We're thankful for the opportunities that we have to build a new
Mm-hmm.
life here.
Okay.
So in that sense, I think they like America. In terms of prejudices against Black Americans or the Black community, yeah, growing up, I was taught that Black people are, different. They're another race. You don't date Black people, that kind of stuff. And it's not like my parents only, it's the whole community. So I grew up in a Vietnamese Catholic community. I used to go to church all the time and go to youth group with all these kids. And like, if you found out that someone was dating a Black person, like everyone knew about it. I
Yeah.
remember there was a time that a parent came up to me because I was friends with her daughter who was dating a Black guy. And she came up to me and she's like, "Hey, can you persuade her to dump him, to not go out with him anymore?" Like,
Mm.
that's the type of stuff that would, be told to me, or like that we had to go through in the Vietnamese community. Or like if there was someone who had a child, she was a teenager and she got pregnant as a teenager with a Black boy.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone at church knew about it as well. So yeah, there are prejudices against the Black community in the Vietnamese community, and I think in any community as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
With that, to me, that's overwhelming. So how do you, when you grew up with these sort of prejudices, how do you even go about, changing your mindset?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. So when I was doing this whole research about mitigating conscious bias and learning about the system of oppression, there's this model called the cycle of socialization, and it's by Bobby Harrell. And it talks about how when we were younger, our first socialization were our parents. They like taught us everything. They taught us how to behave, how to think. And they taught us things like, yeah, watch out for Black people. You can't trust them. Or, watch out for white people. You can't trust them, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
And we're so young and we depend on our parents to teach us what's right and wrong. And we unconsciously conform to their views because we can't think for ourselves. We can't question
Right.
them and say, "Oh, what you're saying is wrong." Like, we don't know any better. And then as adults now, now that we can independently think for ourselves, now we know, okay, this is wrong. We can't do this. We need to speak up. But some people don't speak up because they may lose the privileges that they have, or other people don't speak up because you may be called the troublemaker if you speak up or go against the status quo. So I think that's all part of this system of oppression that we need to educate ourselves on and how to take action.
Yeah. So it's all about being able to take risks within your own community if you grew up with that community to speak up.
Yeah, you definitely have to take risk. Like growing up, I could not speak back to my parents. That would be so disrespectful. But
Mm-hmm.
now I'm starting to, and you have to think of the greater good, the greater cause, and what you're doing it for. And it's going to be uncomfortable. It is a very uncomfortable conversation to have,
Yeah.
but you have to push through that discomfort in order to get to the other side.
Yeah. One thing that annoys me that this made me think of, like, I've been seeing all the videos of like young white girls in particularly talking back to their parents. They're turning the camera on themselves and they're having this dialogue with their parents about racism, and they're arguing like, no, I know Black people. What I'm seeing is wrong. And I love these videos because it's honest. And you know what? I think a lot of times when people have racist parents or grandparents, they are ashamed, so they lie and say, "Nah, nobody in my family's racist." You a lie? I know you lying. Like, how can that even be? Your grandfather's probably racist. Like, if your grandfather is 80,
Hmm.
Come on, what did he
Most
do?
likely they're racist.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think people are so ashamed to admit it. And the first step to me is just like any other addiction, admitting that your people in your family are racist. That's the first thing. And then I had a friend who said that, oh, well, I disowned my parents because they were Trump supporters, or I don't talk to my parents because they're racist.
Yeah.
It's fine to limit in my opinion, it's fine to limit your conversations or even limit what you discuss with your family. But I don't think it's right to disown your family because of things that they believe in. I think it's right to argue with them and disagree with them. But I just thought it was so weird when a girl told me that she disowned her parents because they're Trump supporters. I'm like, you've been knowing your parents. You grew up with them.
Yeah.
And now you decide to not talk to them because of something that you've known about them your whole life. You don't have to agree with them by having them be your parents and love them. You know what I mean? So I think that's also a misconception. Like, they can still be your parents and you can still love them and disagree.
Correct. Yeah. It's going to be uncomfortable living with them or talking to them, but yeah, they're still your family, and it's important to still have that conversation, because if you just cut them off, then you're not really fixing any problem there. I don't think they
Right.
will realize that. And then going back to what you said about how some people won't admit that they have family members who are racist, I think also I find that hard sometimes to say, hey, I have family members who are racist, because you're kind of speaking on their behalf, and it's like your family's reputation there, and
Yeah.
you don't want to ruin your family's image by saying, hey, we have someone who is not good in this bunch, so I think that's why it's hard to mention that.
And you were telling me, which is something that I didn't know, that, in your community, reputation is very important. So that's probably, to give people background, we were talking about this on her podcast. It's like reputation is important. So if you come out and say my family's racist, that gives your family a bad reputation. So it's also a cultural thing that we also need to acknowledge, and that's good. I'm glad you brought that up.
Hey, also just a little tip. If you ever get your nails done, Jazmyn, at a nail salon, because it's mostly Vietnamese people, they say, con gái Mỹ đen, they're talking about you. Just give me a heads up.
What that mean?
It means black girl.
Con gái Mỹ đen?
Yeah, they're
Say
talking
it
about
again.
you. Con gái Mỹ đen.
Con gái Mỹ đen.
Con gái is like girl. Mỹ đen is Black American.
Mỹ đen, Black American. Oh, okay. Girl, tell me when she say, what's ugly? Because I need to know that too.
So they're not going to say that about you.
I'm never going to know that. So is just one of those English words that you just, you use it so often that's one that you could just miss.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm never going to know that.
But they is pretty, so,
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard that.
Okay.
I think I heard that. Yeah. Okay, well, this is a really good question too. As a strategist for companies on organizational development, how do you imagine this will change your scope of work, or, what businesses need from you? Like, it'd be good to hear like a little bit about what businesses ask you to do now and how you feel like that might be tweaked.
Yeah, I think so. The businesses, what they're asking me to do now is mostly like professional development training, from like how to be a manager, how to resolve conflict, presentation skills, or they'll ask me to help them with process improvement strategies, like how to create a recruitment department and all that stuff. I think how it's going to change now is they'll probably ask me for more training specifically on mitigating unconscious bias about diversity and inclusion. And I think they'll also probably want to build programs and initiatives in regards to diversity and help them create a culture of inclusion and belonging, where people can show up being their authentic self and impacting work and all that stuff, right? So I think that's how it's going to change, but I don't know if companies will really do that. Like, I think a lot of companies, especially old school companies, they have more other priorities than diversity.
Like revenue.
Yeah. How to make money. Although diversity impacts and helps out with financial outperformance.
Exactly. We know the more diverse your company is, typically the higher their revenue, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of companies, like old school companies, they won't really do much. Companies who really want an image and really want to look good, they're going to probably require everyone to take mitigating unconscious bias training. And they're just going to check the box. And a lot of companies would just do that, just check the box and make it look like, hey, we're fighting this fight for diversity. But I think what companies really need to do is implement different programs and initiatives throughout the whole cycle of employment, like from recruiting to hiring, to develop them, to retain them. What are some ways that we can structure it in a way to mitigate bias and not let bias seep in?
Yeah, that's great.
So I think my job would be to educate a lot of people on why diversity is important, though.
And we're so thankful for that. A lot of times when people don't understand how good HR teams and good organizational development teams have such a positive impact on what, recruiting and hiring looks like, which means success within any community, with success within all of our colored communities. So I'm excited about people who do that work, and do it well, not just anybody.
I do it well.
We know. We know, girl. I know. You wouldn't even be on this podcast if you didn't do it well. Trust me. Okay. Well, one thing that's kind of funny that was trending. Leah Michelle. I hope I'm saying her name right. She came out and she spoke out about George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. And then one of her co-stars named Jordan actually came out and spoke out about her. She was trending on Twitter. And she said, actually, when I worked with you on set, you made my life a living hell. And Leah Michelle actually even said that she wishes that she could poop in her wig, was the comment that she made about this Black girl. So a lot of times, people are feeling right now, well, I work with somebody who I think is, hostile towards me or prejudiced towards me. What's your advice on like people of color, of any color, handling those relationships, or handling maybe somebody in the workplace who is not very nice to them, and they might know why? It might be because they feel it's prejudice or racism. Let's say you are this person's like manager or business leader. You know what I mean? How do you handle it when an employee comes to you and says, I'm experiencing something in the workplace that I don't think is right? Like, what's your advice?
Yeah, I definitely would listen to them, kind of hear them out, kind of get some observable facts or behaviors of what the other person did to make you feel a certain way. And then it's a lot of just talking to not only the person who felt affected, but the person who affected them, and kind of mitigating that whole issue. At the same time, coming from a business perspective, I'll share with you what I see most companies doing and what I would do. So let's say that they found out that this person, like Leah Michelle, blatantly said something that was offensive, right? Most companies, I see what most companies do is, if that person is top talent and hey, they're bringing in a lot of revenue, what they'll do is basically like slap the person's hand and make them take a training and say, I checked the box. This person, did something wrong, and now we fix the problem by having them go through a training. And then also we're going to get our PR team to write out this nice message and massage the message to say she somewhat apologizes, but really doesn't directly apologize. And it's not really her fault, but it's all of our faults. All of us need to do something about this, right? So I see that's what companies do just to save face. If it was my company, I'd fire her. Like, yeah, like it's like zero tolerance. A lot of companies say it's a zero tolerance policy if you were to act a certain way, if you were to discriminate. They don't follow that policy, right?
Yeah.
I would fire the person, because if you really want to make a statement to change and break the cycle of systemic racism, you have to do something about it. Let her go. I don't care how much money you bring, because if you keep these people in here who continue to act in this certain type of behavior, it's going to kill the whole morale of the rest of the team.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help anyone.
It's true. And when that person gets fired, think about how good everybody else on the team is going to feel. It's like, man, my boss handled that shit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you don't handle it and everyone's, again, low morale, they feel like, the manager doesn't have their back. Why should I care about my job anymore if you're not caring about me?
That is so good. Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about someone who was recently fired for speaking out. So we're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Colored Couch Conversations. We are now in the Keep It Real corner where we give advice to our listeners. Anyone who's willing to write into me, this is actually someone who really is having this issue. I posted, Jesse, that you were going to be on the podcast, and somebody wrote in, a friend of a friend of a friend. They reached out to me and sent me an email, and they said they were recently called out. They recently called out their company. They went to their manager and called out their company for a toxic, racist environment, and they were fired. I know you don't know the backstory here, and just to let y'all know, as a previous HR person, there's so many variables that can happen here. But what's some high level advice for this person that you can give them?
Yeah. First of all, there's a no retaliation policy, and
That part.
Yeah, right. You shouldn't be retaliating. Companies should not be retaliating. That's like, I believe, a federal law, but they always find a way to somehow make it sound like they're not retaliating. So that's one part there. Just to keep it real with this person, like, I wonder, how was your performance before this all happened? Like, were you getting written up for, like, performance wise? Like, did you not meet your sales, quotas or whatnot? And were you just bringing this up and calling your company out for that toxic, racist environment as like a last resort because you're going to get fired, so you're trying to keep your job? That's what I'm thinking right now for this person, since I don't have too much context. So if that's the case, you want to kind of figure out what was the actual reason that you got fired, right? Was it performance, or was it because you said that the company was toxic and racist? Another thing is, when you got fired, I hope you still are in the job or not cut ties yet, because you need to figure out why exactly you got fired. Like, did they say you were fired because you brought this up, because you brought up the company was toxic and racist? Most likely not. Did they fire you because of your performance? Like, you have to have a reason why you were fired. I would also get a lawyer. Let's say that you believe that you were fired and you were retaliated against, and you have like a lot of documented proof. You talk to people that, hey, this is not right. They did something wrong to me. I would get a lawyer to kind of walk you through your options of what you can do. I really hesitate about being litigious, about like filing a lawsuit, because if you do go against a company and file a lawsuit, it's really a long, drawn out process. I'm not a lawyer, but from my understanding, it's a long, drawn out process, and your name is out there in public. So do you want to go through all of that?
Right.
So think about that. And then also, typically when a company fires you for something and it's like a touchy subject, it's not really performance, but you brought something up that maybe bite the company in the butt later, they usually give you a severance package. And they usually give you like money to leave. And if you sign it, then you're basically signing and waiving your rights to sue them in the future or talk shit about them.
Right.
If that's the case and you really want that money, I would negotiate, get more money out of them, like get even more money from them too.
That's actually that's a really good point right there that I didn't even think about. Negotiate that severance, and read it thoroughly. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely negotiate that severance. So it depends what action you want to take. Do you want to sue them and go through all that trouble? Or if you just want to stay quiet, then you would sign a severance and take that money, but you can still talk to your friends about it probably. You know, you might not, you can't say it in public, but you can kind of let people know your experience on it, maybe a smaller scale. I think I'm not sure about all the laws there. Yeah. So those are some things I would think about, but definitely figure out exactly why you got fired.
Exactly. Yeah. And remember, Jesse and I, we aren't lawyers, so none of this is legal advice.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for saying that.
But you know, that's absolutely correct. The person is actually supposed to get back to me with more info, and I want to see, you know, if they actually even get back to me so that I can provide, you know, a little bit more guidance where I can. But you know, this is why whenever you're experiencing any sort of racism or, you know, toxicity, even though that word is overused in the workplace, you know what I mean? You have to document it. If you talk to your manager about it, send your manager an email. BCC your personal email. I know people tell you don't do that. I don't care. I'm telling you, I ain't a lawyer. This is my personal opinion. BCC yourself and say, thank you so much for talking to me about what I'm experiencing at work. I appreciate you for taking the time. You know, I'm hoping that, you know, we actually get to the bottom of this or get to actually look into this X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean? And your manager probably not going to reply to your email, but that's fine because you sent it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely agree about the documentation part. You have to have some type of trail, either it be like an online digital trail or a paper trail that says the date that you talked to someone, who was involved in this conversation, what exactly was said, what did you hear, what did you do? And then I like how you said like BCC or CC, at least someone else has a proof of it. And maybe even tell your employees, like you need also witnesses too, so that you have some support and backup.
Yeah. Cry at your desk. So some people next to you can see you and say, what's wrong? I'm experiencing something. You know what I mean? And go from there. So, Jesse, I really appreciate you so much for being a guest. I think I'm so happy with this episode. I hope people listen to it. I'm going to jam it down people's throats because everything we talked about is something people need to hear. So, you know, what are you working on right now? How can we keep up with you? Tell us, plug yourself.
Oh man, I'm not good at plugging myself. All right. feedlearning.com. So FEED learning.com. So I will continue to post some free online resources for job seekers and people who want to professionally develop as well. So I have some resources for them. Also have a podcast called Feed Learning People Podcast, where people talk about their careers and how they navigated different sticky situations throughout their careers. And Jazmyn is going to be on episode 8 coming out soon. And then what I'm working on is I'm going to continue working on this mitigating unconscious bias training. And I've been finding this as more of like a passion of mine to speak up more and participate more in social justice forums. And I know my mother-in-law, she actually is looking to get her alma mater. She went to an Ivy League school, to make a requirement to take a class about how to break systemic racism before you graduate.
Wow.
Yeah, I think, isn't that like a bold statement, right? For schools to do that?
That's amazing that we're having somebody use their privilege, their connection, their network to drive their school to do that. That's dope.
Yeah, so I think I want to do something like that, maybe help with the education system, maybe even help teachers and learning more about this, you know, these matters, and not only businesses, because I think it starts when we're very young. So the earlier we can talk about it, I think it'll be better for all of us.
That's amazing. I love it. I love it. Okay, well, y'all listen, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast on the platform you're listening to right now. And if you loved our conversation on Colored Couch Conversations, make sure to tell someone about the show. Do not be selfish, okay? You can follow us on Instagram at Colored Couch Conversations and watch the show on my YouTube channel. That's comedian Jazmyn W on YouTube, spelled Jazmyn. Thanks to my dad. And we will see y'all next week.